Hello, welcome to another edition
Hello.
of Thinking Like a Lawyer. We're just going to ignore that you keep interrupting like that. I'm Joe Patrice from Above the Law. That was Catherine Rubino, also of that august publication. And we're here to chat about the week's legal news, with some degree of seriousness, I guess.
I mean, hopefully not too much seriousness.
Yeah.
That'd be weird.
Yeah, no. So we actually have a few things to go over, but before we get to that...
Yeah. How have you been? How was...
not
spring
bad.
has sprung? What
Little
are you up to
bit
these days?
Although some parts of the country I see are getting snow in the next couple of days, so that's not great for them.
It's not fun.
In May.
May snow is not okay.
I mean, I guess I shouldn't say that that's not good for them. I think there's a mega drought going on in this country, so perhaps it's good that they're going to get a bunch of snow.
Am I a terrible person for not even realizing that there's like a mega drought?
Yeah, no, you are.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
I mean, it makes you feel any better. This wasn't the thing that put me over the top on knowing that. So we've got the law review contest going over at Above the Law, and for those, we spell review REVUE.
Well, it's not we who do it, right? That's the longstanding tradition of law school talent shows, basically, to spell it that way. And, it's good to have it back. Historically, at Above the Law, we do an annual competition. We have schools send in their best video of any performances from the law review show. And then we have folks vote on them. And every year, it's sort of a highlight of the ATL calendar. It gets a ton of traffic. People seem really into it. And we didn't have one last year because there was a global pandemic and no one knew what the hell was going on. So even then, I guess some of the performances that already happened and, it was during lockdown, no one knew. So we took a pause last year. And maybe this is, and listen, it was always an online event, right? But it still didn't happen last year. But it's good to see that... good to have it back. A little return to normalcy.
Little comedy, sketch, singing. It's always fun.
Yeah, we have 3 finalists this year. If you go to abovethelaw.com, you can see the commentary that Joe, myself, and our other co-editor, Stacey Zareski, have about them. And we'll see. I haven't voted yet.
Yeah, me neither.
I don't have any. I think I have a favorite. But there are 2 of the finalists use Megan Thee Stallion songs. And so I'm... WAP and Savage are the 2 songs that they do parodies of that I quite enjoy, both of them, to be honest. And the other finalist is a Hamilton song, which is also, pretty classic.
Yeah. Well, great. Before we get going too far into talking about, down this law school rabbit hole, so go there, vote, whatever. We're not going to talk about, we are going to talk a little bit about law school still, but law school is the place that you go to be a lawyer, not an accountant. So take advantage of Nota, a no-cost IOLTA management tool that helps solo and small law firms track client funds down to the penny. Enjoy peace of mind with one-click reconciliation, automated transaction alerts, and real-time bank data. Visit trustnota.com/legal to learn more. Terms and conditions may apply. Yeah, actually, I just got done. I saw New York released its report on how much law thievery happened last year.
Thievery?
Small law, almost exclusively small lawyers dipping into client escrow funds and converting them.
Yeah.
And that's,
I remember when you had to take the ethics portion of the bar exam, I was panicking because, that's pretty much what I did before every test.
Yeah.
But I was like, I'm going to fail. And somebody told me, listen, there's only one thing you have to remember. Just don't mix your money with theirs.
Yeah.
And you're probably going to pass. And I did.
It's unreal that people get... And obviously, a lot of these people in this report, which
are trying to
last
thieve,
year was
right?
the most New York has had of these problems
so
ever,
the most people
which is terrifying.
Done it because of COVID, so many more people were doing it?
Well, it's fewer people, but more money. But anyway,
like the
those
dollar
folks
values.
those folks are trying to be bad actors, but don't let yourself accidentally be in that position by not keeping good track of where your money is. And that's why you use a product like Nota.
Oh, I didn't realize this was all part of the ad read. I thought...
It wasn't. It was just a news story that came up today, but it struck me it's particularly relevant to our friends at Nota, so I thought I'd expound a little bit. I
see there. I see.
No, the conversation we wanted to have, folks may have seen, especially if you read other legal publications. I don't know why you would do such a thing, but if you
Why ever?
did read the Volokh conspiracy over at Reason Mag, you might have seen us become a bit of the news.
Yeah.
We have, over at Above the Law, had a lot of coverage recently, unfortunately, of law professors who believe that white law professors, I think I need to clarify.
Yeah, to be very clear.
Who believe that the best part of law school is them hurling around racial epithets as much as they can.
Yeah.
For the kids, for education.
Well, they have to. How else are people going to learn?
Yeah.
We got to learn them good.
Yeah. How could you possibly understand what racial epithets are if you don't actually always articulate
the
it in the room?
euphemized version. Yeah.
So Professor Volokh wrote an article in the Law Review.
With Randall Kennedy.
Wrote an article in a Law Review about how great it is for white people to use the N-word as much as they can. A columnist of ours, a law professor columnist of ours, wrote a reaction to this on Above the Law about how this is one of the laziest pieces of scholarship he's ever seen. And is just all around embarrassing, and they should feel embarrassed.
Well, and I mean, not that this was gone into initially, but it's also very self-serving, right? Like you've written about Professor Volokh in the past using the racial slurs in class.
Yes.
The uneuphemised version, full N-word, and in particular when they were asked not to.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is also very self-serving in the sense that creating some sort of a academic or scholarly reason for doing the problematic behavior that they are engaged in it becomes justified then, right? Because look at their scholarship about it. Okay, they wrote it, but
and then the real nonsense of the whole thing is after our anonymous law professor makes fun of them.
Correctly.
Volokh comes at us demanding a reaction publication where we would apparently give him space in our pages to react to somebody, despite the fact that he has a law review in which he's expounded upon this, as well as his own relatively successful blog affiliated with a major magazine where he could respond to this. But no.
And also, we don't do one-off publications.
And we don't.
It's just our policy.
But no, he feels it's really important that we have his voice heard in response to this, because
not how any of this works.
Because, when other people feel as though, their feelings are being ignored or their concerns are not being heard by a law professor, that's because they're weak and don't understand. But when somebody makes a joke about him, the presses need to stop and allow him to speak, because it's all about listening to white people speak whenever they get a chance to complain.
That has kind of been the history of this country. So
it was so. Anyway, we brought Ellie Mistal back to respond to it. He responded to it substantively, but
because the piece that they did publish in the Volokh conspiracy was about a second columnist at Above the Law, which a couple of years ago had used a block quote that had an unedited version of the racial slur in question.
Right, and they try to make this as though this is analogous, which, frankly, I don't think this is, because the analogy to the earlier article, which just had a quote from a book that did that, which probably shouldn't have happened, but to the extent it did, that's analogous to saying, you have to read a case that has that in there. Nobody's really arguing that, especially when we're talking about Nazi cases and stuff like that, nobody's arguing that this law ceases to exist. People understand it needs to be dealt with and read, whatever. The problem is when, after reading this case, Volokh wants to turn the conversation for the next hour into him throwing out his own personal hypotheticals about things.
Right.
That's the part that crosses the line into gratuitous
use.
Just being gratuitous with your use of racial epithets for the hell of it. And that's why the analogy to an earlier article of ours having a quote from a book talking about
and again, it was a columnist, not one of the editorial voices.
Of course. And look, if that columnist had felt the need to utilize that sort of rhetoric in commentary, that would be analogous to this and be problematic. But he didn't. Absolutely.
It's a poor analogy.
Yeah.
You know, that analogies are actually an entire section of of standardized testing. Like, I don't understand how
law professors are so bad
at analogies. So I think I think you're right. I think the analogy is wrong. I think that also we publish a tremendous volume of articles at Above the Law. And I mean, how do they even find the article? Do they actually go into the search engine and like type in the full epithet?
That's weird because our search engine is terrible. I don't know. It really was just a poor analogy, even to the extent that it was a thing.
And I mean, I think you're right. And I think that the other thing is that in Volokh and Kennedy's article, they try to make a distinction between use versus insult, right? And that like merely saying the epithet is different than using the insult. And of course, they're different in kind. Of course, it's worse if a professor uses an epithet as, you terrible, slur. Right. Of course, that is worse than if you're mentioning the word.
Right.
Of course. But that doesn't make it okay. Right. We can hold multiple complicated ideas in our head at the same time, both saying that using it as an insult is worse, but it's still not okay to just use it. And I think another point that Ellie makes, I think, quite eloquently is that there's no reason not to change it to a euphemized version. Everyone knows if you say they used the N-word, everyone knows what it is.
Yeah. And that was Ellie's point that was so good.
I'm reiterating his point here.
Yeah. Well, and that's the issue with this use insult distinction that people try to cling to justify their own bad behavior. Sure, there's a difference with use, but it also has to be a use that is required, basically. Look, if you're putting somebody in, you're writing an opinion about like what somebody did that, might be criminal behavior or whatever, the record has to be accurate. Sure. Transcripts has to be accurate. That's a place where it has to be. The law classroom where you're at like, so this person used a racial epithet, what should happen to them? You don't need to do that. Like I mean, I've already used the word gratuitous, but that's what it is. It's an attempt to bootstrap onto the case to
and I've said this before and I'll say it again because it comes up entirely too often, not just Volokh. There are too many law professors who feel like it's okay to use the N-word in the classroom.
It happens way too often.
I basically have a cottage industry about writing why are we still having this conversation? Why are you doing this? And I think having written about it so many times and so many different professors, I just think that there's this sort of Purian thrill, like, I'm transgressing acceptable norms and say I get to say it even though I'm white because I'm in the classroom and this is education, and it's bullshit. It's utter bullshit. And to not even recognize that there's this sort of transgressive thrill that they're getting and trying to capitalize and try to without even recognizing that, I just think is entirely dishonest, whether it's they're not even admitting it to themselves or it's more obvious to them. But it is so clear to me that there's something deeper going on psychologically because there's no practical reason in order to use any racial slur in class.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, law school students are not kids, right? They're freaking adults.
Yeah.
These are all grown-ass people.
Who fully can comprehend the entire discussion without having to go through that. Yeah.
Right. It is completely gratuitous, unnecessary, and really demonstrates your lack of respect for people who are not white.
Yeah. I should have had a counter going with like a ding or whatever for the use of the word gratuitous. I think we got it in there a bit. But I mean, it fits.
If the gratuitous shoe fits.
Yeah. I have a question.
Okay.
How have law firms weathered previous economic downturns and come out stronger on the other side? LexisNexis Interaction has released an in-depth global research report confronting the 2020 downturn, lessons learned during previous economic crises. Download your free copy at interaction.com/likealawyer to see tips, strategies, plans, and statistics from leaders who have been through this before and how they've reached success again. So, if you were running for office, have you ever run for office?
I have not. Have you?
Okay, I have actually.
Interesting. Did you win?
I did. I was unopposed. I was on the Kings County, New York of Brooklyn. I was a Brooklyn delegate to the party committee.
Fancy.
Yeah.
So did you have a campaign website?
I did not.
Oh.
But you know why I might have wanted one? To dispel the conversation about the girl in my bathtub.
What girl?
Yeah. So this doesn't actually apply to me as far
Obviously,
as
yeah.
We all know. But
As far as anyone's able to prove.
as Charles Peruto Jr. is running for district attorney in Philadelphia, and he has a campaign website, and one of the subject headings is "The Girl in My Bathtub." And the first sentence is there shouldn't be a section for this on anyone's campaign site, but because some people will not let this go away, I must address it.
But there was a girl in his bathtub.
There was.
Like a dead one.
Yes, that's the old Louisiana thing. Yes, a dead girl was in his bathtub. It was a paralegal that he employed, as far as I could tell at the time, or at least had at some point. He was dating her, and she died in his bathtub.
Yeah, that's going to come up. It should come up.
Yes.
Like as a matter of like due diligence, right? The press should continue to bring this up. People who are voting on this should be aware that there was they should have questions. If someone wanted to be the district attorney where I lived and there was a dead girl in their bathtub, I would have questions. I think that's reasonable. I think it's reasonable. I think it's reasonable to have questions about the dead girl.
A tweet by Michael Whitney, who was where I first noticed this story going down, makes a good point, which he tags with, when you definitely know math and the law. The section from the campaign website is, in short, the best way to start with this is the medical examiner's report. She was a 0.45 BAC. That means that 45% of her blood was alcohol, 3 exclamation points.
That's not what any of that means.
That is not how blood alcohol content works. Another thing that I feel as though the district attorney should be on top of.
It is disturbing that a potential district attorney does not understand that. But okay, so the person who died, it actually happened a while back, right? Above the Law covered, I think, before either of us were at the publication in 2013, 2014, something like that.
I was here.
Okay.
But because I remember this story.
Okay. Fair enough. I was not.
When I saw a tweet saying something about a guy running for office about a dead girl in the bathtub, I went, oh, I know this story because I was here when we covered it. I didn't write that story, but
yeah. So okay, I've got some bones to pick with this situation here. Obviously, it is hilarious. I will say that like the dead girl in your bathtub.
Right. It's not hilarious that there's a
dead girl, and
who died.
And that is kind of my point. And that is my point. Like he put it on his website as the girl in my bathtub, right? Like that was the heading that he put there. But in coverage from 2013, 2014, he describes the girl as his soulmate, someone that he loved, right? He was in a relationship with them. And okay, there's questions obviously about, somebody that you were close to died in your home, right? Then why don't you have a section that is like, that person's, I don't actually know the person's name, but why not have like so-and-so's name or in memoriam or like the tragic circumstances regarding the death of so-and-so. Those are all ways that also address these questions that don't make a caricature of someone that you said that you loved, right? Somebody who is a person that should be respected as, she had hopes and dreams and was a real person, and he has, by trying to minimize its import in the race for his own kind of benefit, he's trying to minimize who she was as a person and make it just a joke.
Yeah.
Right? Because and I get it, the way he says it makes it seem that way, but he's the one who called her a soulmate.
Yeah.
And now he wants to write it off as she was terrible, she died in my presence, but, and make her the butt of a joke as opposed to, something that tragic, a very tragic. I would be like, this was a tragic thing that happened in my life.
Yeah.
If that, if I was running for office and this happened to me. Because I understand these sorts of tragedies, I can better serve you.
You do
right? Like this is a way to actually talk about it in a way that's productive and relevant to the race that he's running, as opposed to just make it a joke.
Yeah, the whole thing feels almost like a Lifetime movie of the week.
It was, wasn't it?
It was a Lifetime movie of the week in 2018 called The Girl in the Bathtub. So yes, Lifetime has already made this story into a movie. Yeah, it seems like maybe
the sequel is coming, I'm guessing.
Look, this guy has relatively no chance of winning this election.
I would hope so.
I mean,
it's still going to make me salty.
The newspapers that have always endorsed not the incumbent have all endorsed the incumbent this time. So I feel as though there's very little chance, but we'll see. Crazier things can happen. let's take a break to hear from our friends from Lexicon.
Here's a message just for the attorneys out there. So you passed the bar, joined a firm, or even built your own. Now are you finding out that you're doing more administration than actual law practice? Lexicon can help. Lexicon is a legal services and technology provider with over a decade of experience streamlining administrative tasks like timekeeping, HR, billing, client intake, and more, so you can focus on maximizing billable hours and increasing client satisfaction. Call 855-4LEXICON or visit lexiconservices.com/go to learn more.
And let's talk about, you familiar with Judge Lynn Hughes?
I believe I've written about him.
Yeah, Judge Lynn Hughes.
Everybody, I think, at Above the Law writes about him at some point because he's an interesting character in the federal judiciary.
Legal lies.
Yeah.
Judge Hughes, federal judge down in Texas, he is, by his peers, rated as the worst judge in the U.S. system. I don't know whether or not that's fair, but that is certainly what people say of him. He is known for being very mean-spirited and harsh with his bench slaps, which goes around, comes around. He is also on the Fifth Circuit also treats him to a number of bench slaps for his behavior. So he has a new one out, which I read it. I'm going to say something that I'm not totally comfortable with. I kind of think he's got a point.
Are you making a broken clock situation?
Yeah, I feel like he might be right about this one. Judge Hughes put out this opinion about a young man who had tried to join ISIS several years ago. Ultimately did not, but his friend who he was going to join with did. And he gave his friend like all the money he had on him when they separated, handed him couple $100 or whatever it was. It's telling that this opinion doesn't even say how much money it was because it's such an insignificant amount. And he pleaded guilty to this. He actually had renounced all of his leanings to the terrorist organization before he was even arrested. And the federal government wants to put him away for 15 years.
That seems like a wild misuse of federal funds.
Yeah, that seems like that might be a little extreme, and Judge Hughes agrees. Judge Hughes thought 18 months was right. The government appealed. It was kicked back to Judge Hughes. At this point, the guy's been in prison pending appeal for several months, has racked up a great disciplinary record there, is on the mend. He's like pursuing a degree. Judge Hughes says, scoreboard, basically. We now have proof that this kid is
making
on a good
changes,
way.
Yeah.
So we're going to stick with 18 months. And the Fifth Circuit then took the case away from Judge Hughes and is sending it back to somebody else to make sure the government gets the 15 years that they want. And look, Judge Hughes's reason for all of this is it's a little sus. There's reading through the footnotes, it appears as though his big problem is that this case was brought by the Obama Justice Department, and he doesn't trust the Obama people. So, not probably the right reason to be opposed to this. But, I mean, when you read the bio of this kid, and frankly, taking the government's position at its most, giving them the benefit of the doubt on everything they say, I read their petition and thought, yeah, 18 months sounds about right. So, I don't know.
15 years seems absurd. That seems absurd for, this is someone who's renounced.
Yeah, who's not a threat at this point.
Not a threat at this
point. A,
point.
didn't do anything ultimately, and B, is not a threat at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, there we go.
Listen, let's be clear, right? Back in the day, like Irish folks in Brooklyn gave a lot more money to the IRA.
Yeah. No, I mean, that was pretty directly terrorist back then. Yeah, no, the Judge Hughes, criminal justice reform warrior, all of a sudden.
Weird.
Weird. So I think that brings us around to the end point,
Parting is such sweet sorrow.
Yeah, it is. But we will be back. You can check us out in other places, too. We have AboveTheLaw.com, where we write every day. We also have other shows. Catherine hosts The Jabot. Yeah, what were we going to say?
I was just going to say I host The Jabot.
Oh, okay. You want to take that part?
I host The Jabot.
Great. That was worth it.
Do you even know the names of the other shows besides Thinking Like a Lawyer that you're on?
Yeah, well, I'm on Legal Tech Week's journalist roundtable. Well, no, it's Legal Tech Week is how you would get the podcast, but I think he uses that to do some other things. But there's also a weekly journalist roundtable that I am a participant in.
Fair enough.
Yeah. This week we talked about legal conferences and
you were
some
salty about
mistakes.
it, is what I know.
Well, yeah. No,
you were salty.
I had been a defender of these people, and it turns out they were...
Which people?
The ILTACon people.
That's the first in-person conference, right, that you were talking about earlier?
You would think that, yeah. And it is an in-person conference. They just decided not to. Well, originally, we found out, all of us in this legal journalist roundtable, we were all sent documents saying that we weren't invited, that, because of COVID, even though it's in person, you have to log in and watch, which I defended them and said, look, I'm sure this is capacity limits right now. I'm sure they'll get around to inviting us. But what we learned mid-roundtable was that some of us had actually been invited.
So they have a list of their preferred legal journalists to deal with.
No, and it was great. The journalists, we all kind of banded together and denounced this as a kind of egregious attack on the legal journalism world. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, look, those of us not invited resolved is that we're all going to go anyway hold an alternative
Was
conference.
it the first people, the first in, we have 20 passes available for journalists, the first 20 get them? Was that the situation?
No. They invited...
So it's a preferred list.
Well, they invited Bob, who makes sense, as kind of the dean of this.
Bob Ambrosi,
yeah. And then they gave another publication not one, but 2 passes to cover it, which instead of inviting other people.
Publications.
Yeah. No,
this doesn't seem great.
Yeah,
it doesn't seem great. Yeah, well, it'll be an interesting story to write from the lobby of the hotel.
I fully expect to be invited before this is all over, but if I'm not, I actually think this is going to be a lot of fun.
This just sounds like terrible PR too. How do you not know? First of all, in the legal tech world, the fact that you have multiple weekly wrap-up shows is known.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very small pool, and we all talk together.
You talk, right?
Oh, yeah.
And to not know or get out ahead of it, be like, hey, listen, this is the situation. We have a limited number. Get out ahead of it and don't just let people find out on the air, because I guarantee their unfiltered reactions are always going to be worse.
But it made for great radio.
Sure.
But finding out live was great.
I'm saying you're talking as a journalist, which I think is correct, but I'm saying it's a particularly bad
as an organization
PR move, and whoever is in charge of media for ILTA.
It seems like an unforced error.
This is a trip.
It seems an unforced error. Yeah, so that was a long way of saying that I'm on that show.
That's actually fun, though.
Yeah, no,
I like when you get salty about things.
Yeah, and I'm at Joseph Patrice. She's at Catherine1, which is that numeral 1 on Twitter. You can check out the other shows by the Legal Talk Network. Thanks again to Lexicon, Noto powered by M&T Bank, and LexisNexis Interaction. And yeah, that's everything. So we will check in with you again next week.
Peace.